Welcome to Everything is for You, the podcast where we embrace the belief that everything shapes us, every challenge strengthens us, and every opportunity is a step towards our personal evolution. It's believing that everything is happening for us, not to us, that the universe always conspires in our favor, even in our darkest moments. In today's episode, we welcome Basil Mironer, a dear friend, colleague, and now business partner. Our partnership spans over a decade, blossoming into a friendship rooted in mutual growth and support. Basil isn't just a fascinating guest with compelling life stories. He's an embodiment of the very self-discovery we explore here on this podcast. We'll navigate through topics starting with Basil's decade-long journey to Burning Man. We'll dive into the art, expression, personal connections, and the growth he's undergone within this unique community. We'll travel back 10 years to Basil's painful divorce and uncover the resilience needed to move through change, the grace of forgiveness, and the courage it takes to move forward. From there, we'll examine his explorations in polyamory, his quest to fulfillment, and his self-discovery. The story continues as we celebrate Basil's milestones, from finding love with his current wife and embracing fatherhood with the birth of his son. We'll also discuss his documentary, Dandelions, which recently premiered at Santa Barbara Film Festival and has since altered the path of his life, steering us towards family dynamics and their importance. Then we'll turn to his current endeavors in shamanism, a journey of personal transformation, deepened connections with nature, self, and community. Finally, we'll discuss our collaborative effort in creating Conscious Path content, our new business. We'll uncover the origins, the purpose, the vision, and the intentional impact, as well as the evolution of our goals and the mission that propels our company forward. So brace yourselves for an episode rich with narrative, brimming with life lessons, and abundant in exploration of growth. Basil, hello, my dear friend. How are you?
Hey, Kristen, I'm so excited to be talking with you today. My dear friend of many, many years.
Yeah, not that we don't talk every single day anyways, but this is a very special occasion. There's so many things that I love about us and our relationship. But one of the things that is a consistent thread is that we balance each other. It's like we're kind of yin and yang because except for not going into the dark, because we're not dark, but you're very like calm and collected, and your personality is always just like you never get frazzled, and I'm always like and so we balance each other out of how that is. Wouldn't you agree?
I think so. I definitely get frazzled and I experience anxiety. We probably just show it in two different ways, but yeah, I think I grew up in a household that required me to have a lot of patience, and
Mhm.
so how I process that is really sometimes more internal, but my threshold for handling situations it's pretty wide. So yeah, I think we
Yeah.
come at it from two different perspectives, but I think the beauty of it is we end up getting through it almost the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited about this episode because you're truly one of my favorite humans, and I'm excited to share this platform for so many reasons. But we have a lot to cover. As you saw, I put like your life is very interesting, so I wanted to cover a lot of it. So let's start with Burning Man, a place I still want to experience, and I have not taken that leap yet, but I'm going to soon, I know. So you've been going to Burning Man for over 10 years now. And what keeps drawing you back to Burning Man each year, and how has the purpose or the experience evolved with each visit?
So when I first heard of Burning Man, I actually wasn't living in the US at the time. I was living in Singapore and I was going to grad school there for film. And so I was having this amazing experience living in Asia and learning how to make films, tell stories, and getting to do that in a lot of amazing countries through Southeast Asia. And at the time online, I kept on, hearing about Burning Man and seeing photos, and I was like, man, when I come back to the US, that's the first thing I'm going to do is try to go to Burning Man. So that's what I did. Is when I returned to the US, I got a ticket. I remember not really knowing anything about it, but I really resonated with the principles. And so one of them is self-reliance. And so I knew I needed to take care of myself. And so I ended up trying to figure out like a makeshift shelter in the front yard of the apartment complex where I was living, the one that I got married in,
Yeah,
where
I
we had the
remember.
marriage that you went to.
Mhm.
And so I remember setting up this makeshift kind of rickety thing out of PVC pipe that totally, it was so bad now looking back on it. Because when I actually got on the ground at Burning Man, and our friend Will Watkins invited me to his camp, so I actually stayed near them. But I was like, no, I'm gonna do this myself. I'm gonna set up this little hut by myself. So my wife at the time stayed under this little PVC shed, and it was miserable, but I felt really proud for having kind of done it and been super self-reliant my first year going out there. And what's kind of kept me going back is I would say the overarching ideas of how people can come together in community around principles that resonate with everybody, and
Right.
then create something out of that. And people often talk about the idea of, well, there's this magic at Burning Man, and when you think about in the spiritual circles that we live in, people talk a lot about magic. What is magic? And ultimately Burning Man is that idea of people coming together and creating a energy bubble, a collective. And
Mm.
because of that, there is a certain magic that is created, and people tap into that. So you could be going somewhere in the city or through the playa, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I really need this, or I'm really struggling with this. And there's that phrase called the playa provides. In a sense, that's the magic.
Mhm.
You bring whatever it is that your soul needs on the journey that you're having there. So that's something that's always, I've just found to be really kind of an incredible idea, and I've seen it firsthand. I've experienced that magic there. So that's what keeps me going back. And over the last 10 years, I've gone there with my ex-wife. I've gone there with my partner. That was the relationship after that, and that's actually where I met my wife, Panda, now. So it's been kind of this through line for my love life as well.
Didn't you meet Flavia there too?
No, I met Flavia at a different transformational event called Lightning in a Bottle in California.
Oh, I remember.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and so that's a good one too. That's a great group of people that put that one on.
Well, I've heard with Burning Man, it's changed over the years. That's kind of like what the news is like Burning Man has changed, it's changed. That does not, I'm not saying that's for good or bad, but what, like, from your perspective, like, has it changed? And if so, like, how?
It's a funny idea, right? This idea that we hold on to, I think, as people, an experience that we had in the past, and then we hold on to the idea of it, and we're like, wow, it was like this, and now it's not anymore. And it's like, no, what's happening is you've just changed as a person, and there's new people that are coming into the fold. And I think that the the
Very
amazing
well
part of
said. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the amazing part about that is there's people that come into that community from all around the world, and the people are what create that space. So yeah, it's changing every single moment that you're there, you know.
Right.
I
Right.
think it's just people attaching to a nostalgic idea more than anything. I would say one practical thing that's changed is there used to be a lot more fire, and now there's a lot more electronic lights. So that's
Yeah.
technology evolution.
Yeah. Okay, well, that I'm committed to one of the reasons for this podcast is for now, because this can evolve and change as well, and we'll let that evolve and change. But I'm really dedicated at the moment in time to helping people that have gone through challenges with heartbreak and pain and relationships. So I wanted to, when I first met you, you were just getting married. And that, like you said, you got married at that apartment complex, which was really beautiful. You did a good job putting that together. Um, and we used to go down to Comic-Con and do filming down there around this time. And I remember when she was your fiance, your first wife, and I would say, "Oh, your girlfriend," and you go, "No, no, no, she's my fiance." And I remember thinking, God, it's so cute how, or
Okay.
it's very kind and sweet how in love he is with this woman, that he's just like, it makes sure, no, no, that's my fiance. And it always stuck with me because
Mm.
it was just very cute. And I think that first year we went to Comic-Con, you got married, and then I believe the second year, and I could be wrong with my timeline, but I believe the second year you were separated and getting divorced, and you were
Yes.
very sad, and you were going through a very rough time. Um, can you just give us a little like a little talk about, you what you can tell us what, as much or little as you want, but like what happened in that relationship in that year of time, and
Mm.
how was it with your separation, and how did you deal with it while you were working and stuff, and just give us your experience of that heartbreak.
Well, it's really funny to hear you recall that I corrected you essentially to say, "Oh, it's my fiance." I think that's hysterical, especially looking back on the transformation that I've gone through, this many years after. But I think from the very beginning, I was sold on this idea of the romantic, right? And I have, her name's Lori Handlers, and she talks about how in life we're sold this idea of the Hollywood kind of movie Disney idea of what love is. And so you grow up and you're just, for me, that was it. I was like, I wanted to be romantic. I wanted to find this love of my life. And the reality is it's a lot more different than that. It's a lot more complicated, but we're sold this idea of it. And for me, I felt at the time getting married that this was what I needed to do. This was the path. This is what everybody does. I was gonna, no matter what, just stick with this and see it through. And it's kind of like a blind commitment. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually, you think it's something honorable, but the reality is that it's a fallacy because you're not present. You're just stuck to the idea of I need to be in this relationship or I need to be married.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was basically sold this fantasy of our Disney relationship and Disney marriage. So when I corrected you, I'm sure I was like, no, I'm like, oh, this is my fiance. This is the step I'm taking. But the reality is, hey, it's just another person on the end of the line, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up having that marriage and that ceremony, and it was beautiful and it was so fun. I just remember organizing it all. And the best part about it was having everybody there. And then it was tinged with this thing at the end of the night where my wife then and I had a kind of a disconnect at the end of our night of getting married. And it kind of, it was unfortunate because we got into a fight and I felt like, man, this sucks, but this is just what it is. And you get through it and you get through the hard times. But the reality is that because I was so stuck on this fantasy and this idea, we weren't having the kind of transparent conversations and the communication
Mm-hmm.
wasn't happening where we would literally sit down and say like, hey, this is the reality that we're ignoring as two people. And so I ignored, moments of infidelity. I ignored moments of where she was upset and I wasn't aware or didn't know to ask what was wrong. And ultimately all that stuff kind of bubbled up. And yeah, the marriage, you know, it was over in a year. And I remember being so crushed. I remember, you know, driving to my friend JC's house in Long Beach, and just, you know, like feeling like the whole world is falling apart. And what's funny is when you feel like the whole world is falling apart, at the same time, there's like this, like, I'm alive feeling, like I am experiencing this thing, you know. And it's heartbreaking, but also very cathartic, I think, because of that. I would, you know, work with my friend JC. We were working on a script at the time, and I would sometimes, you know, just break down in tears. Like, it was too much for me to handle the fact that this idea had completely fallen through my fingers. And I was almost attached more to the idea of the relationship, of being married, more than the person at that point. And so it's hard when you lose such a, like, a cornerstone of how you perceive life.
Yeah.
And it set me on a whole new path after that. You know, I know that you'll probably resonate with this, but for me, I was like, I need to be the phoenix coming out of the ashes, you know, like I need to really like open myself up. And so I committed at that point. When I had that idea, I was like, I'm gonna say yes to everything. I'm gonna
Hmm.
you know, I'm just gonna go out into the world, and I'm also gonna look at what is my shortcomings. And for me, my shortcomings at the time were linked specifically to codependency, which was also linked to this idea of the fantasy relationship.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting because yes, I do I remember feeling like, okay, I'm just going to say yes to everything as well. I you know, you say the phoenix rising from the phoenix, I say I'm like the lotus flower in the mud waiting for the sun to shine and burst through into the blossom. So yeah, we all come up with our thing that helps us kind of cope with whatever it is we need. Was there a moment of forgiveness between the two of you, or was that just organically, like you guys just kind of parted ways on terms of just understanding that you're on different paths?
Oh man, it was she said red, I said blue. It was like there was no moment or ability to connect or communicate well. We went to a therapist at one point after we had split and were separated, and you know, that did not go well. We just could not, you know, see eye to
Yeah.
eye or hear each other. And it really, that really taught me, you know, that communication is something you have to kind of, it's like a plant you water from the very beginning.
Mhm.
And you have
Absolutely.
to have the tools and skill sets, because we all have different strengths, and maybe a person that you're seeing doesn't have them, or might have better, you know, things that they can share with you. And um
So so from this you kind of went into, you know, your healing path, and then again, my timeline could be a little bit off, so please correct me if I'm wrong. um Not too long after this, you kind of started dabbling and experimenting with polyamory. Is that how the timeline went?
Yeah, so it's interesting because for me, polyamory was about dealing with those ideas of codependency, and also dealing with jealousy, because I was the type of person that I remember in undergrad, I was, you know, going to school at Georgia Tech, and that's where my ex-wife and I had met. And I would get so angry and so jealous over very stupid, trivial things. And I disliked this part of myself. You know, after we
Mhm.
split, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, man, this is something that drives me crazy in my brain. I'm like, I don't know why I react like this. And but it's no surprise. I mean, we're fed this fairy tale of what
Mhm.
relationships are, and what commitment is, and what they're supposed to look like. And so I was just following that. And so I ended up getting into a place where I wanted to tackle that. I wanted to say, hey, I don't want to feel this jealousy. I want to come from a place of love with my partner, not a place of control. And how do I go about doing that? And so I had kind of a role model, and it was a couple that I had gone to Burning Man with, actually introduced me to polyamory, and not through like other anything other than observing them and how they did their relationship. My friend in that relationship, the guy was basically an amazing and is an amazing person, and he was so patient and came at everything from this place of being really open-hearted. And I was always amazed at not just his patience, but how he held everything around him and from this place of love, including his partnership. And the like pinnacle of this was that he wasn't ready to have a child, and she was. And so she ended up having a child with another man, even though the two of them were married.
Mm.
And so their first kid was actually not with her husband. And I was like, wow, like this is pretty incredible, you know. And if you look at the history of polyamory and kind of this idea of like hunter-gatherer culture and tribal culture, there was always the concept of raising a child with a tribe and not being so nuclear family like we tend to be nowadays in modern days. So for me, polyamory was essentially a way for me to work on myself. And so I read books, went into this idea of trying to really become aware of what feelings were coming up for me in my relationships. And I had started a relationship with Flavia at the time, and she was also new to polyamory, but we kind of talked about it, and a lot of our ideas aligned on that. And so we were able to put that into practice in our relationship a few years after we met. And I think that's what's interesting, is because you can identify with an idea like polyamory and you can resonate with it. But when you do that in your relationship, can be a choice, right? It doesn't have to be from the very beginning. So for us, it was 2 years after being monogamish that we
Yeah.
started seeing other people together and separately.
And do you think, and I know that I know both you and Flavia pretty well, but do you think that once you opened up the gate to exploring polyamory, in after a few years of being together, um, is what separated you, or would you say that just growth and change separated you?
I think the polyamory brought us closer together. I think growth and change after 5 years is
Hmm.
what definitely made us part. But at the time, polyamory was amazing because it fed into the art she was making, the films that I was making. It really allowed us to just talk about ideas of how to approach our relationships and the people around us and the relationships with ourselves, and about values. Um, and I think for me, one of the things that I really resonate with around polyamory is this idea that when you're with a person, when you're with a partner, the choice to be with them is something that happens in every single moment. Like, it's not an assured thing. It's not a contract that you sign. It doesn't matter if you're married. It's
Hmm.
literally two people come together, and every moment they say, okay, I choose to be with you. And that comes from both parties. And if that's really at the core what a relationship is, then you have to also be able to say, well, I want my partner to be open with me. And if they desire something, and if they're missing something that I can't provide, I rather them communicate that to me. And I need to receive it with grace, and be open to receive it in a way that also communicates to them that I don't control you, that you are a sovereign person, and that because of that, like, thank you for honoring what you need, and let me see if I can receive it in a way where you feel heard, where your needs can get met. And maybe that's a boundary for me that I can't, that I can't do.
Yeah, so one of my questions is, you said when you were with your first wife, your ex-wife, um that you had some jealousy issues, and that's one of the reasons you moved towards learning about this polyamory. How did any of those come up when you started exploring this with Flavia? Like, did you ever have jealousy, and how did that affect you and the relationship?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the funny thing is just because you say, okay, I'm going to be polyamorous, it doesn't mean that the jealousy part is going to go away. So I think, the mindfulness, it all comes down to mindfulness. In a way, it's almost a mindfulness practice. How do we acknowledge that feeling exists, and how do we feel it in our body? How do we like process that feeling in our body, and how do we feel the next feeling, essentially. And that is how you treat jealousy with polyamory. The only difference is that if you're not thinking of that way, and also it's not in just polyamory, I think in any relationship, that's
Mhm.
how the basis of handling jealousy. I think the difference is that in a polyamorous relationship, you might have to deal with feelings that aren't just surface level jealousy, but when your partner is actually with somebody else, and doesn't come home at night, and you
Mhm.
say, okay, how am I going to be with myself? How, am I just going to walk around the house and clean the house? Am I going to sit down and do some sort of self-care routine? Am I going to try to hide from this feeling and go out with friends and go try to meet somebody? And it was always a conversation of, okay, well, can you be just with yourself? Is that enough in those moments? And the whole time you're dealing with feelings of jealousy, insecurity, and it's like a mental mind game, essentially. But what that mental mind game allows for is it's like stretching a rubber band, right? And then at some point you like stretch it enough, and then you realize, oh, I'm actually able to let a lot more into my life because I'm not closing myself off from feelings. It's not for everybody, and I am polyamorous still, but I'm not currently practicing polyamory,
Mhm.
So for me, it's
Right.
something that comes back sporadically through my relationships.
And I guess that, this kind of communication is a key factor in this kind of relationship with polyamory. Like, you have to be so open and communicate so honestly, and not have, because if you're not being completely open, then and you're kind of holding back some stuff, that could cause stress in the trust and the relationship as well. So it is kind of practicing like really like communication on a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it's polyamory or monogamy. I think that the tendency is that people who practice polyamory usually educate themselves on communication practices, interrelationship communication practices more often than maybe monogamous couples because there's just more of a requirement for it within
Yeah.
the relationship unit. But I think
Yeah.
ultimately the the everybody benefits from how to communicate openly with a
Really,
partner.
every relationship. I mean, every business, friendship,
Yeah.
lover, whatever, like communication is key to having a healthy, grounded relationship.
Well,
Um,
and I just went to, therapy the other day with my wife, and the therapist is like, so now instead of saying that, can you ask your wife that question directly? It's like, yeah, sure, let's do it, and I'm like, because, and it's like, I really try to be aware, but your feelings and kind of your defense mechanisms, no matter how many times you've done this, they come into play. It's like the human nature part. We protect ourselves sometimes, and it's hard to ask direct questions and request what you need.
yeah, yeah. I do think that you and Panda are what I've seen in front of me are really beautiful at that. I've seen some really beautiful moments with you too. There was one at your wedding, where you guys were really busy putting things together as you do. You don't ask for a lot of help. You kind of handle things on your own. and there was a lot going on the brunch day, and you were running around, and there was a moment where she was like, well, are they getting into the car or whatever, and you said, you know what, I really need to take a break and I need a minute. And she goes, okay, I got you. And it was such a beautiful, I'm kind of destroying that moment by not giving the best description of it, but I've seen a few of those moments between you where I've really like saw, and I went, wow, that's beautiful. Instead of like snapping back or being like, I can't right now, you like were very calm and collected, and you both just really looked at each other and helped each other's power give, she took the power over to be able to go and achieve what needed to be done. And that was beautiful. That was really nice.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that moment, and I love that you were there to witness it because it gives me appreciation for not just that moment, but moments where I'm not showing up that way.
Right.
And because I wish I could just always show up in a way where I'm able to listen to my body, understand what I need. But it's like a muscle you have to train. So sometimes
Yeah.
if I'm overrun with anxiety, because I don't show anxiety outwards, I show it
Mm,
inwards, and I tend
right.
to turn my anxiety into work, trying to get things
Mm.
done, and then I put blinders on. In those cases, I don't show up that way. And, I wish I could always,
Well,
show up in a way that impresses you.
I mean, look, we're all a work in progress. And the beautiful thing, and one of the reasons for this podcast and all of the things that we devour for information and education is to become more, aware and heart-centered in our daily lives. And it takes time and steps and commitment, and so we're all imperfect people trying to do the best we can and communicate. I know we're covering a lot of different topics, so I'm gonna keep kind of jumping because you have a lot going on, and it's very interesting.
All right.
So let's talk Dandelions. Now,
Mm.
Dandelions is your documentary that just recently premiered at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. And this movie I've seen many, many times, and I cry my head off every single time. I just cannot watch you cry. It's like it just breaks my heart. But it's such a beautiful film, and it has such a beautiful message. Can you just kind of give us in a short pitch of what this film is, and so the audience kind of understands, and then I'll kind of get into some other questions I have about it.
Yeah, so Dandelions is a feature documentary, and it's a story about my life. When I was in Singapore going through grad school, I received a Facebook message, and the Facebook message was from these two teen kids in Russia. And they said, hey, we know that you don't know us, but we know you. And our father is actually your biological father. And I thought, oh my God, this is totally a scam. Like, what is this? What are they trying to get out of me?
Mm.
And, I was born in Russia, and we immigrated to the US when I was 4. And I've known my mom and dad my entire life, and my brother. And all of a sudden, these two kids come out of nowhere and are saying, our dad is actually your dad. And so they sent photos over, and I realized this isn't a scam, but this is a reality. This is a family secret that I have a biological father that my parents didn't tell me about. And as a result, my brother and I are half siblings, not full siblings. And at the time, it was such a shock to my system that I basically took 8 years, and I was integrating this information, trying to understand it. My brother Ben and I are 13 years apart. So I also had this feeling of I couldn't bring this and share it with my parents and with my brother because I was concerned about not only why we had this secret in our family, but why Ben, well, how Ben would take it essentially, because he was so much younger than me at the time. So 8 years later, I finally got to a point where I was ready to look at this reality. And the first scene of the movie is me telling him about this message that I received and about the truth in our family, which is that I have a different biological dad. And I asked him to come to Russia with me to track down my biological family. So that's what the documentary is about. It's a personal, emotional journey from the US to Russia and back to sit down and talk with my parents.
Yeah, it really was a roller coaster of emotions, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was beautifully shot, and just the emotions that everybody feels while watching this. Um, so going to Russia, you're on this journey, and then how has this changed your perspective of family and identity?
Well, for me, as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, for me, identity has been the thing that I've been drawn to the most. And at the time, I, grappling with the idea of what does this reality mean for me? What does having a biological dad that I haven't met mean for me as a person? I I didn't even really know that that's the journey that I was going on. I just knew, okay, I need to go do this so I can, you know, check this off. I want to experience life knowing the truths of life, you know.
Mm,
So I needed to do this. And so the way I did it was by having cameras around, because as a
mhm,
filmmaker, that's how I process the world, and that's how, I was able to go on this journey and document it. And meeting my biological father allowed me to really fill in the gaps of who I am as a person from an identity standpoint, from things like my temperament, why I look the way I look, accepting those parts of myself
mhm.
more. And for me, that journey just allowed me to accept myself as a person. Uh, More than I already had at the time, but to really
Mhm.
fill in those gaps. And it was a really intense experience.
Yeah. Well, I know your mom and your dad personally, and Ben, and you guys are a very close family, and your parents are extremely supportive and adorable. I love them. But so how has this affected you guys as a family, and where like how is everybody feeling about, because now the film is out and everything? Um, yeah, has it brought you closer?
After we filmed the project, it took us 6 years to edit it. And during those 6 years, I'd be, sitting in the room watching scenes, crying while editing. And, it was a cathartic experience, just the filmmaking process and post for me. And I got to a point where about 5 years in, Ben called me and he said, like, hey, our parents still haven't seen this, and you've been working on it for 5 years, and they don't know everything. They haven't seen the whole story, everything we went through. Do you think it's time, we show it to them?
Mhm.
And so I said, yes, you're right. I called my parents up. I said, hey, you guys have been supporting me creating this project. I'd like to screen it for you. So they agreed. So I flew to South Carolina and I set them up in the living room. And I said, okay, here you go. Here's the movie. I'll be back in an hour and a half. And so they watched it by themselves. And I was freaking out the whole time. I was calling everybody, calling Ben, Flavia,
Mhm.
like walking around, calling Mitch and Mara, being like, oh my God, my parents are watching it. I don't know what to think. And I finally got to the point where my mom texted me and she said, hey, we're done. Where are you? So I came back into the house and they were sitting in front of the TV and I saw the credits were rolling and saw that they had been crying and had this emotional reaction. And so I got to sit down with them and I realized, like, A, they loved the film, and that through the process of watching it, they had released a lot of fears and
Mhm.
understood what I had gone through and given them perspective on their own journey as well to where they are in life. And it really felt in that moment that the film was medicine. The film was not just a story, but that the
Mhm.
story, the film itself, had become like a medicinal experience for my family. So as a result, it allowed everybody to release their fears, be more transparent with each other,
Mhm.
and as a result, bring each other closer because there weren't these invisible kind of blocks and walls up in the family at that point. And we
Hmm.
had to look at everything truthfully from that
Yeah.
point forward, and also acknowledge what our differences are, and that it's okay that we have these differences, because what we choose at the end of the day is each other, and support each other as a family, regardless of whether I'm biologically related to
Hmm.
my father who raised me or not, or that Ben and I are half brothers or anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible experience for my family.
Yeah. Well, it's an absolutely beautiful story, and I hope it gets distribution soon so the world can see it.
Me too.
Dandelion, Dandelions, the documentary. You got to go see it, everybody. Yeah, as soon as we know where it's going to be aired, we'll post it in the show notes, and we'll have another. We'll definitely get the word out. Um, so we're going to jump a little bit again, and I want to go into your practice and attraction to shamanism, which then kind of led you and I to kind of get on the same path, that and then we created our new company, Conscious Path Content. So I know during the pandemic you kind of started really getting interested. Do you want to kind of briefly tell us how you got interested in the shamanism, what it's kind of done, for you, and if that was a big part that led you to this path that you and I are on together?
So it's first off, I just have to say the idea of this podcast being around heartbreak and what it brings us to and how transformational it can be is just, I think it's so on point. I just love it so much that this is the discussion that you're having with people. Um, the idea for me around mindfulness in general, which eventually led me to explore shamanism, came actually from a moment in time where my current wife and I, before we were married, were in a point of breaking up. And we weren't together, and I was again going through one of these crazy moments of like the world is falling apart. How am I gonna, handle life? And what happens to me in those moments is I try to look inside myself. And so I ended up taking classes at Inside LA through a friend of mine, Corey, who is also an amazing filmmaker. And he recommended, hey, try these mindfulness classes. And I started going, and what's interesting about mindfulness for me is that when you start it, you think like, oh, I'm gonna, I'm gonna meditate. I'm gonna learn how to meditate, and it's gonna like calm me down. It's like, no, the opposite happens. What happens is that you open yourself up and become aware of yourself. So all of a sudden, you're experiencing life in a much more dramatic kind of way. You feel your emotions more, and you're not hiding from them. You're actually experiencing them in a more open way because of mindfulness practice, because of meditation. I ended up getting back with Panda, and had really kind of working on stuff, and then again we hit a bump in the road in the relationship. I'm like, man, what do I do? So Flavia at the time had recommended that I check out a program that her sister had gone to. And that program is called ISTA. It's the International School of Temple Arts. So I signed up and I said, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. We both agreed that, we needed a little pause and for me to go on that journey. And I didn't know what to expect. So I flew to Ecuador, of all places, and showed up there. And for people who don't know what ISTA is, it's the International School of Temple Arts, and they offer different programs that focus on three areas, and they focus on those three areas together. So the areas are spirituality, sexuality, and shamanism. And so you enter this container there, and you're working with a group of people, with facilitators that are incredibly knowledgeable. I mean, people that have been working in the space of tantra, shamanism, spirituality for decades and decades. and you go into a really strong container there, and you set an intention for yourself, and you're working on that intention, not even like consciously, but like subconsciously, as you're led through a series of exercises and kind of experiences. So for me, what was amazing at that point is I had entered and to be clear, there's no plant medicine. There's no, you're
Mm-hmm.
not imbibing anything. It's actually mandatory that if you're in that container, that there is no um, substances imbibed. And so you have to be pure of body as well as mind. And after 3 days of being there, I felt that there was a shamanic portal that essentially had opened up in that practice space, because the amount of healing and amount of conversation and energy that was basically emanating in that collective space was so strong that I was feeling, I would wake up in the morning, and I would feel so much energy kind of rushing through my body. The way that I would describe it is I felt like I had lightning that was just rushing through my body, and I felt like it was just about to come out of all pores. So I was holding
Mm-hmm.
that much energy in my body because of that container, and it was pulsing through me. There were moments after that point where you're in the practice in the space, and you felt like you were on plant medicine even though you
Mm-hmm.
were sober, but I was having a shamanic experience through just my body, through just looking into myself, through diving into my subconscious through various practices, and being led by very skilled facilitators during that time. And it allowed me to really look at myself in a way where when I left that container, I came home, and after like a day of Amanda being around me, she said, "Oh my God, you're like I don't know what happened, but you're a totally different person. Like you were so aware, you were so present around me right now." And a lot of the things that they teach, they ask that the participants don't share the things that are in that containers so as not to spoil it for people who want to do it. But one of the things that they do teach are kind of practices of the conscious masculine and the conscious feminine. So in terms of how a relationship works, it shows, they go over what are practices, how can you show up in your masculine in a conscious way, and what are examples of when you're not doing that so you can be aware of them. And
Mm-hmm.
they do that for both when you're in your masculine and when you're in your feminine. And as a result, I gained not only the these tools, but I was also able to go on this transformational journey to look inside myself, inside my own traumas. And I came out of there just being like, wow, our existence, we are the portal. We don't need
Uh-huh.
plant medicine. We don't need it. Like you are a living, breathing portal if you can drop in and create that experience for yourself. People talk about tapping into source and things like that. For me, I'm just like I'm the portal. So if you
Right,
become
right.
aware of being the portal, then that's the thing. So that's what led me into the kind of my first step, I guess, towards shamanism and towards kind of a conscious
Mm-hmm.
existence
Right.
beyond mindfulness. And then I kept going down the path after that.
Yeah, it's funny because you and I, we both always been, open and spiritual for, but it's kind of like because when I went to Colombia for my retreat, I feel like it was right around the same time. I just had
Mhm.
gotten home. You had just pretty much gotten home because I remember you telling me I started doing breath work in Colombia, but that was my first time ever doing breath work. And when you were telling me your experience shortly after I returned, you were telling me yeah, like we did this breath work that just out of body type of energy experience, and I was like, really, And so I really like dove into breath work, and I do breath work probably 5 days a week now. I try to be as consistent as possible with 5 days a week. But yeah, and I do all different types. And you're right. I've done, where you definitely feel that portal, which is, it's absolutely amazing. I came home knowing that I wanted to make conscious content. And I was talking to you about it of like, I just want to make content that matters. And also, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but I am it drives me so crazy to watch the content that is out there because it's so beautiful and it has so much meaning, but it's so poorly done. And when I say poorly done, I just mean it's cheesy. It doesn't have that cinematic storytelling feel that I want it to have, because now I'm kind of watching it and just ignoring the cheese. Like the
Yeah.
reenactments and all of the things that they put to tell the story are just not what normal storytelling is. And I don't know why nobody's connected the two yet. And I was like, let's connect the two. I'm dedicated, so I know that you and I are on
Right.
this like path, this revolution to re-look at how conscious content is created, and really come from a narrative storytelling point of view with cinematic feeling. So people that are on the fence might actually jump over the fence and be like, ooh, I want to learn more. And people that are already there can actually enjoy it. Because if you talk to anybody that watches, a lot of those channels that are, giving this, it's just, we need to help. We need to help it be better. So I know that we created Conscious Path the full service agency. It's basically content creation and marketing for companies that are walking the conscious path, right? Um, I I know that this has been a dream of mine, and it feels really good. I want to know from you like what your perspective is, and I kind of went all over the place and lost my train of thought, so I need your help to jump in and save me.
Well, first off, I think you what you're also alluding to is people are hungry. People are
Mm,
hungry for this content. I think there is a kind of conscious revolution happening around people realizing that there's like a balance in this world, and we need to be feeding our kind of the conscious spiritual side of ourselves while the rest of the world is moving forward, and we're becoming a more modern, technologically driven society.
mhm.
Sometimes values get diluted. And, I think people are hungry for content like this. And so often I hear people wanting more, and they're kind of, echoing exactly what you just said about wishing that it was better. I think that for us creating conscious path content, it it's a way to give people that. It's a way to have people share their stories and to have us help them share their stories. But ultimately, I think it's also for me personally now becoming a crusade around being authentic, not just for myself, but for the stories that we do tell. Because when you say that, the ideas of what's being told there is important, but somehow the execution doesn't feel
Mm,
like it's delivering the message, there's a disconnect between the experience. It doesn't feel authentic. It
yeah.
feels like, some there's something missing, right? So I think what makes us an amazing duo, not that just we've been friends with parallel stories for a long time, but that we're committed to helping people tell these stories in an authentic way. And it's hard because there's so much information out there. There is like all these people doing this, that, and so how do you cut through all that messaging to find what is it that is the essence
The
of
core,
what
yeah.
the core of what you want to communicate, because it's going to serve all people as you walk the conscious path.
We're here to serve those who are serving others, right? It's a very broad niche, spirituality and holistic and wellness. There's a lot of different people doing it, and there's a lot of learning and teaching to be told. And that was our whole purpose, was to be able to connect those together. And we just started it. We just barely did a soft launch. We haven't really truly launched our company yet. I'm excited to see where it takes us, and I'm excited to work with all of these amazing people all over the globe, and to build that kind of community, and to help create content that people can actually really sit with, and have that authentic experience, like you were saying. um so
Yeah.
we are working very hard to get this up and moving. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, with your new marriage, you just had a baby. How old is he now? 6 months?
Yeah, as old as 6 months.
So 6 months. So new company, new baby. It must be challenging to find the time and the pattern that you need to be able to build a company, to keep a healthy live life, relationship, and have a brand new baby. How is that going for you?
Well, transparently, because you're very patient with me, it's going great. Um, but that it just speaks to our friendship, and the fact that I can communicate, hey, I have these needs. It's like we're not in a romantic relationship, but we are in a relationship
We are,
that we
yeah.
have we have to communicate the same way as two partners who have a baby. Our baby is conscious path content, so
Yeah.
sometimes I gotta go, hey Kristen, I need to take care of myself right now, like, do you mind handling this,
Yeah,
and
but sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
like, one of the things that we're trying to build, well, we are in the process of building,
Mm,
with conscious path content, is work life relationships, to where we've been in the movie industry for 20 plus years, and we have worked 15 to 16-hour days like it's normal. My last job was 60 hours a week, normal. And
yeah.
that's just not okay. So building a company that is heart centered, that is about being able to have quality of life and enjoying the work that we do. So it's a very nice, beautiful balance. And I feel like you and I are doing a good job at that as we're creating it. And as long as we know that that is very important, then the other things are just going to flow. I really trust
Yeah.
this process right now.
Yeah.
And I trust that, our heart centered business is going to hit the right people, and the right clients are going to just fall effortlessly towards us. And we're going to do some good magic in the world.
Yeah, and with you saying that, I feel like one thing I just want to highlight is that at the end of the day, it's for us conscious path content, one of our pillars is community, so as we're doing this, it's about being part of the community,
Mhm.
serving the community, and growing it at the same time. And
Yeah.
I think that is ultimately the power of conscious path content over the long term, is
Mhm.
that it's not just of service to the world, but it's of service to everybody who's in the community. Because whenever somebody has an offering and they're able to share it with the world, the other people in our community benefit from that.
Mhm.
And there's a real power that a little serious, like almost shamanic energy circle that is created with more people and more people as they come into the fold. um so yeah, I'm extremely excited because we have a very short time on this earth, and I want to make sure that we're affecting and creating positive experiences and transformational experiences for people by helping them share their stories.
Absolutely. Very well said. I'm so honored to have you on this, and I can't wait for you to be on more of them, and come back and with other guests and so forth, because I'm excited about this platform as well. I think that
Yeah.
this platform just connects so organically with conscious path content. And I feel like this is a healing thing for myself as well, with everything that I've been going through. So thank you for sharing. Your life is extremely interesting. A lot of your journey will resonate with different people at different places, but you've had this really incredible, interesting journey, and you're so young. just look at what's going to be next. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like we're just at the beginning of the next thing. So I'm excited. Well, I absolutely love and adore you, and thank you. And I'm going to be talking to you later today.
All right. I love you, Kristen. You're such a natural and easy person to talk to. So talking to my friend on a podcast doesn't get better than that.
Well, all right. I love you, buddy. And I will talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.